Alright, we're streaming. I'll just get started then. So, we're fussing around with an underwater game. One of the things we don't really have at the moment is a surface, so I figured we could make one today. Now, one of the advantages of an underwater game like this is that you don't really plan to go above the surface, so we don't have to worry about getting the water effects from the top yet. We're just going to be using a flat plane with some distortion, and it's going to be opaque. So we won't be able to see this guy. We'll be faking it. And I'm wiping down my glasses because I somehow managed to get them covered in fingerprints. All right. So we're just going to start with a plane. There it is. Drop that plane into the world. Put it at 000. Oh, loudly snort straight into the mic. Gave myself the hiccups. Sorry about that. And you can see that the plane is pointed... There it is. It's pointed up rather than down. See that? So what we really need to do is not just increase the size to like 200, 200, 200, but also flip it over. So, zow. There. Lots of other ways to do this, but this will do just fine for us. And basically, we are... Sorry, the visuals are screwed up because I... there we are. Because I haven't been keeping up with certain aspects of it. But basically, here we are. We're underneath it. And if we hit play, we're going to see that the surface is... Where is the surface? Is it up there? Is it really that high? No, I think we're way above the surface. I don't think that surface got properly put in. So here is this big-ass plane. Let's lower it down a little bit in terms of size. It's a little bit big. It was big enough that it was giving us trouble with our shaders because they're based around specific sizes. And you can see that this is something that cuts off the top like this. See that? It should be something that we run into pretty quick. As the player character starts here, they actually start at the plane. And that would probably be the issue. The issue is probably simply that we were even with it and it was... giving us trouble. So we'll just start a little bit lower for now. I still don't see the plane. I mean, the plane shouldn't be in... Oh, it's right here. I can already tell. We're on top of it. No, it shouldn't be, though. It should be up there, right? What is going on? Let's go ahead and raise it up some. We'll just move it up to... I don't know, 1,000 meters, 1,000 centimeters. That'll put it above most of the things we want to work with. So now we have free reign down here. So there was definitely something weird going on. I'm not sure what's going on. It's just a plane. It shouldn't have anything complicated happening here. All we should know is that it's stopping us from going above it. But it's clearly... Ah, here it is. So for some reason I couldn't see it. I don't really know what's going on. My guess is just that the visual's a little bit soft, and my eyes were not ready for it, so I didn't really see it. So the plane is definitely here, and basically we've got a couple of options. One of the options we've got is the visual, and the other option that we got is the air piping. You know, we're gonna get some air into our lungs. If we do want to put air into our lungs, does it make sense to put it at 0? I think so, yeah. Let's go ahead and drop it back down to 0. Now, the only issue with this is that it is pretty low. At 0, it is right here, which is really much, much lower than you might expect. And I think that that's something we can fix by simply lowering the rest. So let's put it back up for a second. And we'll just kind of select everything. They're not currently arranged in a really great way, as you can see. One of the major issues is that our terrain elements are not going to be something we can move very easily. It might make sense to just make it an arbitrary height. Let's go ahead and just make it an arbitrary height. In this case, we'll make it 500. And then we'll just have that arbitrary height be something we can set, something we can work out. So we'll go ahead and start with that. So to do that, we'll go into the player character. Here it is. Edit that blueprint. Here we are. So we have something that checks to see whether or not we have a breathable object in here. If we're within range of a breathable object, we should be able to restore air. The question is exactly where we put that. Movement, mouse, Hud creation, oxygen depletion. I thought we put it here in the player character. Did we put it in the harvestable object instead? Or the refillable object instead? We might have. Let's take a look. So here's the object. Here it is. So yeah, we actually are doing the refilling from the object side rather than the character side, which is fine. It's maybe not the best way to do it. It might be better to do it from the character side, but this will work. However, the key here is that when we actually tell the player to refill their health or their oxygen, we don't just set the oxygen level. We use this accept oxygen function on the player. So every tick, we're going to check our position, and we're going to refill our oxygen if we're above a certain position. So here's our HUD creation, which starts with a specific tag. We'll just move this off to the side here. And down here in this oxygen depletion, we're actually going to move the depletion off to the side and do a regeneration pass first. And just to do the regeneration pass, we're going to have a variable named sea level. And we'll put that at 500 for starters. And later on we can adjust it. We can change how this all works. It's not a big deal. So we're just going to check and see whether our position is, near sea level, within a certain range of sea level. Or above. I got a little piece of carrot in my teeth. I'm sure you're very interested to know. A little bit annoying. That's fine, though. So we need to have the location of our character, which we should be able to get just by get world location. Yeah, that should do. And then we want to break it. It's an int vector? That doesn't make sense. This isn't what we want. It's something else. We may have to pass it a function or something to get the... Oh, here it is. It's just a bunch of functions here. Okay, so we can get whatever we want, right? I guess we're going to get the capsule's world location. That sounds like a decent way to do it. I don't know why the other one was an int. That was definitely not what we wanted. There was something else going on there. We'll break that out. And we're looking for, I believe, the z vector. We can check real quick just by popping over and taking a look at the position of the plane we created. Plane 2. We'll call this sea level. And you can see that it's the z factor that's up there. The reason I always get that wrong is because Unity uses the wrong axes, and I've gotten used to that. So all we need to do is check whether or not z is above a certain threshold. And in this case, we're going to want to just use the world sea level. We're currently using the sea level of 500. We actually want to make that like 497. We could also subtract or modify these values. But basically, we're going to bounce our head off of the sea level. We're not going to let ourselves go above it for now. And we don't want to make that interfere with our oxygen refueling. So we have to just get close to the top of the ocean. Boom. There we go. So if we are above sea level, then all we need to do is add to our branch. Nope, wrong one. Come on. Sometimes the mouse gets really finicky. I think that it's like a modal thing, where it thinks I'm trying to pan when I'm trying to zoom or something similar. There we are. So if we are near the surface, there's no reason to bother depleting our oxygen. We're not using our oxygen at the surface, but more importantly, we're going to regenerate some oxygen. Now to do that, we're going to use this accept oxygen function here under true. And the amount that we're going to put in is going to be based on the delta time. It's not called delta time though, is it? It's called, oh, there it is, delta seconds. So we could make it the negative delta seconds, but that's just not big enough. We need a much larger number. So we're going to multiply this by an arbitrary value. And the value in this case will make it 10. So you'll regain 10 seconds of air per second. We can change it later, no big deal. And then at the end, we could go off and pipe this over here. There's not really any reason to, but it would keep our flow clean, which is probably a good idea. So then we'll grab this, we'll move it up a little bit so it's a little bit more square. Put in a big old comment, well, we'll say surface air. Hit play. And if we take a look at our air, it's up there in the corner, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22. And you can see that we are not regenerating air at all. So to check what's going on here, we're going to pause. And we're going to take a look at our character and see what our Z position is. $465. 465? That's weird. Is this at 470? It's at 500. If this is 500, how... oh, it's in centimeters. That is such a weird unit. I still haven't gotten used to it. So basically, I thought that was in meters, and it's in centimeters. So our height isn't 497. It's like 450. There, see? Refilling all the way back up to our maximum, which is 60. And there we go. And I don't know why this plane is here, just for kicks, I guess. So now what we have to do is make it look like it's the surface of the water instead of, I don't know, a giant ice sheet. So to do that, we're going to need a new material. We'll go back out here and we'll go into materials and we will create a material for the underside of the water. Now there are a number of materials that we could inherit from a water undersurface. There are a number of materials we could inherit from the water plugins, and those water plugins are free, but they're all intended to be looked at from above. There's no water plugin effect for below. There is something that could be useful, the wave function that you can use. We're going to put it off. We're going to leave it. We'll deal with it later. Here we have our watercolor. This is going to be an unlit surface, so we want to change this to unlit. There we go. And that's because, just obviously, we're going to be trying to fake the fact that there's light coming down from above. So our primary goal here is to figure out where the player character is based on their camera. Figure out where the camera is. And we're going to be drawing basically two circles. We're going to be drawing a circle near the camera and then everywhere else, right? And near the camera is going to be bright blue, kind of like the sky, and away from the camera is going to be much choppier and darker. That's just how it looks. So to do that, we're going to get range from camera as a node. Now I can't actually remember the best way to do this. I think camera depth fade will work fine, but I have a weird feeling like I'm forgetting something important about camera depth fade. Either way, well, let's go ahead and add in some values here. So we'll promote this to a parameter, and we will call this fade length. We'll call this fade length. So what happened is it highlighted the parameter name and then it selected something else. It left the parameter name highlighted, but when I typed, it was typing into some random other place that wasn't the highlighted parameter name. Brilliant choice. And now, of course, what that actually is doing is it's expecting you to type it here. So we can change this to fade offset. Fade length and fade offset. And that should be fine. We can then pass this into a simple color lerp. No, down here. Now this should be a generic lerp. Maybe. I suppose we'll find out. We'll add in a color, which is, I believe, a 4. Yeah, here it is. So this is going to be our sky color, which we'll make nice and bright like this. And then we're going to want to just pass that in and see whether it sticks. It does. Good. And then we're going to have a ground color or, a watercolor. It's a bad name for it, but whatever. At this point is fine. And that's going to be a lot less bright and cheery. Why is it a different width? That's very weird. Whatever. We'll drop that into a missive. So at this point, we should have a very, very simple function that creates a circle, except that these values are at 0. Sorry, excuse me. This is in meters, so we're going to go ahead and just put in 1,000 as a test. And if we move, we should see that happen, right? So I think what we're seeing here is that this is the sky color, and then the dark color over there is the watercolor. But we have much too soft a result. So what we're going to do is the actual fade length is going to be quite small, like 1 meter. And the fade offset needs to be shorter, like 5 meters at the moment. We'll figure it out. There's something... The problem is that as you get further away from the water, the sky doesn't retract. So really what we want is to use the camera's position with no Z value, but it's okay. We'll figure it out later. I just need something that works well enough to not be distracting. Yeah, so there you can see our basic setup where you've got the bright and the dark, and it looks pretty bad right now, and that's because we don't have the chop built in yet. The chop will also mask some of this camera distance shenanigans. The camera plane is not a 0 point. It's a large thing. It's an area rather than a point, and that means that as we move around, we get a lot of the distance from the camera is not accurate at the right and left sides of the screen, which causes a lot of shearing or distortion. Which is why our circle doesn't look like a circle. That's fine, though. So, range to camera is definitely the wrong thing to be using. We'll work on that. But for now, let's go ahead and do a couple of details. First off, we want this to be way bluier, like this. And second off, we want to add in some chop. So what we're actually going to want to do here for the fade length, the issue we have is that we don't know how far the camera is away, and we can't modify how far the camera is away. All we can do is modify something like the fade length or the fade offset. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add in a value here. We'll use just a simple noise field. And the position is just going to be the world location. There it is. And the filter width, I'm not 100% sure what that means. Either way, we should be able to simply add these together. And what that'll give us is a fade length between 99 and 101 or something similar. It's going to be a very, very small oscillation. The other problem we've got is that it's never going to change. This is going to be frozen in space because our world position, being the noise value, never changes. So what we actually need to do is adjust the world position by some arbitrary amount. We're going to want to be using some kind of delta time, but I don't know what delta time this is. This might be delta time since last frame, but it might also be delta time since level load. We want delta time since level load. So let's take a look. Here's time. Time. Oh, we'll just use time. And then basically we're going to multiply time times a vector of our choice. And then we're going to add that to the absolute world position. Very basic, right? And the vector of our choice is going to be x, y, z value that we want it to be. And in this case, I think that the best option would be something that's got some numbers on each rather than just being nothing. So we'll do like 0.7, 1.1, and 0.45. Hit OK. It's green, definitely. That's the funny thing about this game is that this game engine is that all vector 3s are interpreted as colors, even when a lot of them are supposed to be positions. It's a interesting choice. I think we can just shrink it like that so that we don't get confused by it. So we should still see some very small vibration. Simplex noise generally just goes between -1 and 1, see? But I think we're allowed to change this. So let's go ahead and make it a full meter in each direction. I think that we can do that without having to put in a multiply node. I think it just works. We'll find out. Canceling edit constant. Did I screw something up? So we definitely have some chop. You can see how we've got this like dancing effect on the edge. Maybe you can't see that. Now that dancing effect is way too small for the waves we want. It's too fine-grained. We're going to have to change it so that we have a much more aggressive size. And so that means that this world position is just too big. So we're gonna go ahead and divide it. Now, normally speaking, we could just change the simplex noise scale. Here, we'll just change the scale. Do we want to go down or up? I don't actually know. We'll know in a minute. We'll try them both ways, and whichever way works is what we get. There we go. That's correct. So you can see we're kind of frozen in space here. It moves, but very, very gently. So we're going to want to radically change this. You know, I don't actually know whether or not the time is accurate. We'll know in a minute here. We're going to change this from 0.45 to 4.5. That should be the vertical aspect, meaning that these waves won't sleet along the surface. They'll just go up and down. They'll vanish and appear. It's happening, but it's still really slow. Let's go ahead and make it even more. Let's keep on pumping it up until it feels right. 14.5. That's more like it. So now you can see the sort of visual we've got. But the problem is that as we go towards the surface, it changes the way that this works. And it's actually the opposite of what we want. If we're down here, this is... I mean, it's not exactly what we want because it doesn't have the right circular feel. We really want distance from the center of the camera. But from up here, it's really bad because the point at which we could see the sky from up here would be like right at the camera. It would just be like a dot on our screen, which means that the camera fade distance just isn't working out for us. We need to have some other measure of distance from camera. And so for that, we're going to try and get the camera position. Got a screen position, but I believe that is the position of the pixel on the screen that we're trying to currently draw. Depth from world position X, Y. World position X, Y coordinates with scale input. I don't know what this means. It's from another function. Okay. So in theory, yeah, okay, so here we have it. So absolute world position divided by... This is weird. Okay. That's definitely not what I want. I don't know what it's trying to do, but that's not right. All we really need is the camera position, though, so we're going to try and find it here. Camera offset, camera vector with whoop-o options, camera world blend, triplanar camera vector, camera position was... Oh, world space, good. So we have the camera position in world space, and really what we want to do is not a bit mask, just a mask. There we are. So in theory, this will chop off the Z position, right? It'll just give us a vector 2 that doesn't include the Z position. If we get the world position of our object, you know, what we're drawing, and we also do this, then we should be able to get the range between these two vectors. Distance. There we are. So now we have a distance that we could pipe in to camera depth fade. However, camera depth fade doesn't actually do what we need to do. It doesn't have an input that we can pass it. So we have to do the camera depth fade manually using the same basic parameters. It's really not that tough. All we have to do is subtract from the distance here, and then divide here, and then clamp here. It's a little bit messy at the moment. We can clean that up. So I heard that the most recent version, or the newest version of this, as soon as it's released in the near future, is going to have local variables for shaders, which is something I've been yelling at Unreal about since I first took it up. And in fact, that's the reason I didn't pick up Unreal last time I took a look at it, because the lack of local variables made everything a mess. But it looks like that's gone away. So we'll find out in the near future here. Either way, we should now have a set that ignores the Z element and just takes into account the absolute XY. So no matter how deep we go, it's going to look the same range away. See? The only issue with this is that we actually need to use the Z component. It just needs to be inverted. The longer the Z range, the bigger the radius. So we're going to take those masks and we are going to add in a Z component as well. So to do that, we're just going to mask again. But obviously for just the Z. I don't know whether or not distance will work for a float. I guess it will. Now the reason we're using distance is so that we are getting an absolute value. It's just an easy way to do that. And basically all we're going to do now is the distance we have RG and the distance we have here, we're going to subtract them? I think we're going to subtract them. Let's find out. All right, so as we move away, as we move towards, yeah, I think that's actually right. I just think that we need to pump it up a little bit more. Yeah, let's go ahead and make it a little bit more aggressive. We can double the amount of subtracting, I think. No, we can't. There's no pins on the subtract. All right, so instead we're going to have to modify it. So We'll multiply it by 3. So as we go away, it stays very, very far away. As we get close, it gets real close. Perfect. Now the only problem here is that the values are wrong, which is not that big a deal. We can change the values real easily here. All we have to do is track them down. We should have values over here somewhere, right? Or maybe not. I guess they're not where I thought they were. We can set them up here. We got the fade offset of 5 meters. That's right. It is, in fact, the fade length that we need to work with here. Default value of 100. Turns out that this is what we want, the fade offset. Fade length and fade. I have them backwards. So that's a reason why it looks so big. They're just backwards. No, wait, they're not backwards. Are they? Hold on. I'm confused here. So we set up this noise value, and then we add the fade length to the noise value? Did I mistakenly set that up? Did I do that wrong? Okay, so the fade length... Interesting. I did it backwards. These are backwards. So basically, I was trying to change the fade offset, and instead I changed the fade length, which meant that I had a really big circle. We're going to switch it around. We may have to adjust some of these values again. But that should be okay. Just take a look here. So if we go up close, you can see that it's like very big. It's huge. These numbers are far larger than they need to be. So we're going to take that fade length and drop it down to 100 because it's 500 right now. And that's still too big, so we're going to drop it down to 0. And then we're going to take the fade length and drop it down to 0. This is what it is with zeros. Well, let's take a look here. So basically what we've got here is we're adding, because this is like a full meter, right? Yeah, the noise value is quite large. But this shouldn't... We can just break this and see how it looks. Yeah, so that is how it looks with just a 0 and no noise. The noise isn't changing very much. So what we've got here is a fade offset that we subtract from this whole camera position deal. It's a z-axis that's screwing us up. It's this 3. This is the problem. Let's bring that back down to 1 like it was before. Too many values, too many variables. Yeah, so that's how it's supposed to look with the z-axis that we're using. It is not too shabby. Let's put the noise back in. Yeah, that is basically how I want it to look. It's not perfect, but it gets the job done. It leaves the impression you want to leave. Right? I think that's pretty solid for, half an hour. And we can work on making it look better later on by adding in, like, more distant effects or whatever. But this is the effect I had in mind. This is what I wanted it to look like. Whether or not you think that's a good idea is up to you. I just needed it to be a surface. I just needed it to exist. So I've saved that. I'm going to close it. We'll close this. Leave the first person character open. I'll probably need that. All right. So if we take a look at how this plays now, we can go up to the surface. We can draw air. We don't have any sounds or anything yet. We'll have to figure that stuff out. We can dive down into the cracks here. And we have some very generic interactables. A full minute of air is too much, by the way. That's like late game air supply. We really need more like 30 seconds or so. That's fine. It's no big deal. And then we can come over here and fill it right back up. See, the thing about the air supply is it's a value we can change. Max oxygen, default of 60. We'll just bring that down to a default of 30. We had it starting at 30 already, with the idea being that we would get to see it go up to 60 if we found a refueling. But 30 is definitely more in tune with what we actually want. And we can continue to swim around, right? Oh, look at this big cave down here, or whatever we would like. We can even change things like how fast it goes down depending on our depth and stuff like that. But right now our HUD is really primitive. We don't know how deep we are because our HUD doesn't tell us. It's just a number. So what we would really want to do is create a HUD that has more values and can reflect more stuff. Or we could just go with pure freediving and have the player guess. So obviously this cave made of nothing but rocks is not ideal. In an ideal world, we would have a much more compelling universe full of much more compelling things. It's just that in this universe, the only thing we've added is rocks and some white cylinders and white balls. So obviously, not the most fantastic setup. It's just starting to test things. So the other thing we could really use here is a voxel terrain system. I don't know whether or not Unreal has a free voxel terrain system. I know that it's not stock, but let's just take a quick little look at our packages. Is that under Edit? Plugins. So if we do a search for voxels, that's VVox, voice chat, that's not it. So search for terrain? No. Okay, so it's not in any of the default packages, at least not with a useful name. It could be available for free on the shop. I can't show you that because I broke the shop for stupid reasons that we won't go into. I'll have to open it up off screen and reboot the computer and shit like that. Now, the reason I would like to have voxel terrain is just because it's much easier to create these kinds of sea areas if we have a voxel terrain editor. When we are trying to create terrain, surface terrain, it makes sense to use height maps, but voxels make sense underwater. So it would be ideal if we had the ability to paint voxels here. Like that really popular children's game. There's a really popular children's game, mobile children's game, and their terrain editor is voxel based. So if they can do it, you can do it, Unreal. I believe in you. You're probably the only people with more money than them. But since we don't have one, we would have to build everything out of meshes. We could use height maps, but their limitations are pretty substantial. The depth-based play means that we really do want to have a layered approach, and height maps don't work great with layers. So it would be like the lowest layer would be a height map, and then we'd have 10,000 pounds of meshes on top. It just wouldn't be great. It would be really annoying to build. In terms of the visuals, there are a couple of other visual things that we need. We need to add life. We need to change the rocks so they make more sense. These are just like, 5-minute rocks. I put them together super fast. There's lots of stuff we can do. But at the end of the day, this is the visual I wanted. Not with the yellow lines. The rest of it is the visual I wanted. It does feel like what I had in mind. I mean, it's obviously limited since I didn't really put together assets for it. It's super basic, but that's a pretty good visual right there. That is what I had in mind. So, yeah, that is exactly what I wanted to see. Yeah, we just need to make it better if we want to make it into a game. Do we? I don't know. Refill our air. Magically undrown. I've been talking all morning for unrelated reasons. I don't have too much more voice in me, I'm afraid. And we got everything I wanted to get done today done. I don't really have any other plans because I don't plan more than an hour of work for each stream. In the next stream, we'll probably make some 3D meshes and stuff like that. But I think we're done for the day. Gosh, it was only 40 minutes. I feel terrible. But I didn't announce it and nobody came by anyway, so it's fine. See you around, everybody.